Good afternoon. That's me. I'm part of the Innovate UK Horizon 2020 team. Really my role is really to advise on the rules for participation for all of Horizon 2020. So my role is pretty much a sort of horizontal role. So supporting not only industry, academia, but also the other national contact points in our group. In terms of specific advice and sort of deeper knowledge of the myriad rules that are involved in participating in Horizon 2020. Okay, if you've got any particular questions as I go through a presentation, happy to take any questions. So stick your hand in the air or shout out. Happy to do that, or questions at the end, whatever suits. So where do you start with Horizon 2020, really? I think one of the important things is to sort of understand the game that you're involved in. And I think the point here is that Horizon 2020 is quite different from the previous Framework 7 and Framework 6 projects that went before, and different to other funding streams, whether it be sort of old TSB, Innovate UK, or any other programs. The political aims are sort of different, the rules are very different, so don't make assumptions in that respect. So I think to participate effectively, you've got to understand the process, as it pertains to Horizon 2020 in particular, the whole pre-proposal process, how you actually go about submitting proposals, understanding how they're evaluated and what the Commission are looking for specifically. The grant preparation stage, sort of lovingly called negotiation in Framework 7, but was anything but. And having got to that stage and been successful, you've actually got to deliver the project. And not surprisingly, there are still lots of opportunities to get it wrong at that stage. So, if you don't understand early on what the rules are, what, for example, the Commission are looking for, you're going to write the wrong proposal and evaluators are going to mark it down, so you're not even going to get in the game in the first place. In terms of costing and things like project delivery, if you get it wrong, you don't record costs or staff time in the right way, you don't understand the detailed rules, then again, at the end of the day, the Commission simply won't pay you what you put into your cost claims. So not lots of opportunities to get it wrong. Inevitably, the way to avoid that is to be informed and to find out the information. Commission have got their wonderful participants portal. For anyone who's been involved in previous EU programmes, I would have to say the participants portal is hugely improved. There's a lot of information in there. It's not too bad to negotiate, but when you first look at it, it is quite hard going. After you've perhaps spent a few hours finding your way around it, it does get easier, honest. But certainly in comparison to the Commission's previous efforts, it's significantly better. So even if you go into the sort of front page of the portal, there's information there on how to participate in the programme, telling you all about the different stages, and providing quite a lot of quite clear narrative on things like sort of finding a partner, finding a call, creating a profile of the organisation and submitting the proposal. So all the information, by and large is there. You've got to make the effort to, be informed. The other thing on this screen, on the menu on the left-hand side, are the two things here. One, the online manual, another one, a reference documents page. The online manual is a fairly useful resource. There's a graphics part to it in the middle of the screen, so you can quickly select an area of interest to you and drill down quite quickly to get more information on specific parts of it, whether it's registering the organisation or the evaluation process or international aspects, for example. And what you'll find in there is quite a lot of information, links to additional guidance documents, and sometimes these guidance documents don't exist elsewhere in the portal. So quite good. I would say in some areas it's still incomplete. The Commission are still busy writing away, so you'll find some holding, still at this late date, it's got to be said, find some holding pages in there as well. The reference documents page, well, as the title suggests, it's a whole page full of links to various documents. There's a lot of stuff in there that is about the sort of political background to the programme. The two areas that are probably most important are the H2020 Grants Manual. So in there are different descriptions and guides and things like registration of the organisation, financial viability, and for example, a good powerful guide there on evaluation, describing in quite a lot of detail exactly how the evaluation process works and exactly what the evaluation criterion for the programmes are for. There's something called the Annotated Model Grant Agreement. I'll talk about that shortly. And a whole section on things like horizontal issues, whether it's of ethics, third countries, and so forth. So generally some quite good information in there, and very often you'll find additional guides, 20, 30, 40-page guides that go into quite a lot of detail where necessary. The next area is under work programmes. Well, under work programmes you will find things like the 2016-17 work programmes that the rest of the guys have been talking about today. You'll also find an important document called the General Annexes, and that describes all the things like the basic eligibility criteria for the different types of projects. It describes the different types of actions or project types, so it describes the difference between research actions and research and innovation actions and coordination and support actions, for example. And that's obviously fairly important. There's been a bit of a mention of technology readiness levels now in projects. These are described in general annexes as well. So quite a lot of good information in there. And it's also worth pointing out that the general annexes has been updated so that the current version is specific to the 2016-2017 work programmes. So there are some changes in there with regards to funding of things like pre-commercial procurement. There are some small changes to descriptions of the evaluation criteria. So worth having a look. I mentioned the Annotated Model Grant Agreement. I don't have my copy with me today. It's too heavy. Take me over my baggage allowance, I guess. It's currently some 634 pages, and as the title suggests, it is a copy of the EU's grant agreement, effectively the contract that you sign up to, with a whole bundle of annotations in there to describe what they actually mean by all the formal text and all the various articles in there. Pretty detailed, but importantly, there are quite a lot of worked examples in there in terms of things like costings, how you calculate personnel costs, productive hours, and for example, how you'd use things like sort of third parties in projects. Not the easiest thing to read, but quite useful to dip into parts of it for some further clarification. So the overall participation process, similar to, in broad terms, similar to Framework 7. And really I've just sort of broken it down into broad areas. And I guess to some extent the first thing is something that Tim sort of touched upon. You know, the place to start is, does the project type, does the programme and all the timescales suit your need as a business or as an organisation? Then going to find calls, find partners, go through some pre-proposal activities, proposal activities, an evaluation stage, grant preparation, and project delivery. So I'll mention a few bits and pieces within these sort of broad groups. The pre-proposal stage, everyone's got to register with the Commission, now all fairly straightforward. And by and large, all organisations only need to get access to the Commission security systems and get a participant identification code or a PIC. And they're ready to enter the proposal process. Quite a lot of organisations we speak to get a little bit confused by that. They seem to think they need a great deal more, but it's simply not the case. Some of the things, the problem areas we see as national contact points is that if you have SMEs involved in sort of projects, they've got to, if they're involved in projects where they have to be, where SMEs are required in the project, or that's an evaluation criteria or an eligibility criterion, they've got to go through a self-assessment process. And one of the other things organisations get confused by is when they first register, the system says that they are declared, and they believe that before they put in a proposal, they've got to go through a further process. That's not the case. They only get validated as an organisation once the project's on a ranking list. So very often that causes a bit of panic in the consortium. So if you're involving SMEs in a lot of these sort of projects, the issues we often see is that organisations try to get a PIC number and register themselves as a wrong type of organisation. You know, they think they're a non-profit SME, but somewhere along the line forgot that they were sort of a subsidiary of Sony Corporation or something like that. And these sort of things do happen. So you can get some funny status issues of organisations as they're sort of spin-outs of universities, or organisations that you know, have been part of some public body, or organisations that believe they're public bodies but actually aren't under the rules. So these sort of things can cause delays to the whole process. So you know, you need to keep on top of these and make sure it doesn't cause issues. The proposal stage, things like eligible costs within the project are pretty much the same as Framework 7, so personnel, subcontracting, third parties, other direct costs such as T&S, capital equipment and so forth. But there are a few subtle changes in there compared to previous programmes. VAT is now an eligible cost where it's non-recoverable by your organisation. Capital equipment, well, capital equipment has always been chargeable to projects, but based on the depreciated value, the book value of that equipment and the percentage usage within the project. That still remains within Horizon 2020, but there is a subtle change in that all the costs for capital equipment may be eligible when they're used within prototypes or pilot plants, large-scale demonstrators, for example. And quite clearly, we're seeing a lot more of that sort of activity as projects have moved away from the sort of early TRL levels, and particularly in the societal challenges, we're seeing a lot of projects up much closer to market, and the demands of the calls are for much more sort of pilot demonstration activities in real environments. So very often you'll find that in these types of projects, all of the capital costs of the equipment used may be eligible within the timescale of the project. Internally invoiced costs is quite important. We have predominantly academic audience here today, obviously. In Framework 7, you could charge for internally invoiced costs. So typically in large industry and in academia, you'd have different faculties, different units that carried out different tasks. So, you know, in business, there might be a unit over there that does some machining work. That would be charged internally. It would be an eligible cost. For some of you guys, it might be another faculty that carries out tests, measurements of some description, and there may be a standard internal price for that, and in Framework 7 you could charge that. You can't do that in Horizon 2020. Any costs like that must be broken down into time and materials and charged as such to your project. That makes life a little bit difficult, and the big test case at the moment that's been put to the European Commission is the example of animal houses. And people have said, well, it's quite ridiculous that if you've got an animal house, now in Horizon 2020, every time we go to feed a mouse in an animal house, we're going to have to charge 3 minutes of a technician's time and a very small handful of food for each individual mouse for a particular test. Clearly, that's fairly silly and not a very efficient way to go about things, but that's the way the rules stand at the moment, so be careful with that. Productive hours calculations are very much the basis of personnel costs. They're broadly similar to Framework 7, but now there's option to use fixed number of hours to charge personnel costs, and that would be a fixed number of 1720. Now that's quite useful because it means there aren't any calculations required, record keeping is easier, and an auditor will never ask you to prove the number, which is quite nice. The problem obviously is it's 1720. It's quite high, so it dilutes the hourly rate. And obviously for most of academia in the UK using sort of 1650, then that could be a little bit of a problem. So you've got to balance out kind of the advantages and disadvantages. For SME owners involved in projects, we have a particular UK issue in that we have lots of SME owner directors who don't pay themselves a salary, or they pay themselves a very small salary for social cost purposes, for NI, and they reimburse themselves through dividends. Dividends aren't an eligible cost, personnel cost within projects. So SME owners can use a flat rate scheme that uses the numbers from the Maris-Sklodowska-Curie reference rates. But you've got to be aware that these have changed and are significantly lower than they were in Framework 7. So there could be a few SME owners out there who might get a bit of a surprise if they assume they can charge the same rates or the same eligible costs as they did before. Subcontracting, you can subcontract within projects. Broadly the same as previous programmes in Framework 7, but the difference is you can use subcontracting for action tasks, named action tasks within the project, which wasn't the case before. It still should generally be limited in terms of the amount of subcontracting, and again, you've got to show value for money in that process. Nothing there much different. Things like third parties can make contributions to the project. And I think some of the sort of typical issues we're seeing with people in the early stages of Horizon 2020 are issues over sort of personnel cost calculations and arguing whether things are subcontracts or not. So in spite of the simplification of the programme, still seems to be plenty of questions over some of these things. Reimbursement rates I won't go into in any detail. I'm sure most people are sort of reasonably up to speed in that, but broadly the point is that everyone within the project is reimbursed at the same level, irrespective of the type of project, the type of activity within the project, or the type of entity that's carrying out that work. So that makes life a little bit easier. The only difference is that for closer to market innovation type actions, these are reimbursed at 70% of eligible costs, but it remains at 100% if you're a non-profit entity. So as I mentioned earlier, establishing whether you're non-profit or not and being able to prove that to the Commission is quite important. There's something in here I'll mention in passing. You're not allowed to claim for actual indirect costs based on your actual internal indirects, as you could in Framework 7. But the Commission brought in something called large research infrastructures, so there is the ability to claim some overheads as direct cost to the project, but this has got to be based on a certified methodology with the Commission, and you've got to have a research infrastructure of book value greater than 20 million euros. This is something that I thought many universities, a lot of academia would get into, as well as a lot of large industrial organisations across Europe. It doesn't seem to be the case. I think there are only something like 5 entities all across Europe have been certified for this. Basically, I think everyone's looked at it and decided it's too difficult, not worth the hassle. Okay, and that's just a sort of breakdown, worked example of funding rates for anyone who's interested. Evaluation, hugely important, obviously. Again, very much the same as Framework 7, still evaluate in 3 areas: the excellence of the project, on impact, European impact, and quality and efficiency of the implementation. So the consortium and your plans for producing the project. Each of these typically scored out of 5 with an individual threshold and an overall threshold of 10. We get lots of people who phone us up and say, I just missed the funding line, my project. The Commission absolutely loved my project. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I got 12. And you go, well, actually, it's not that good. So what we're seeing is that many projects are getting 14, on occasions 14 and a half, and not getting funded. Okay, so hugely, hugely competitive. Pretty much across the board. It obviously varies across different themes and you know, topic areas, but very, very competitive. So you need a very, very good score to get onto the funding. I guess just some evaluation hints and tips, and it follows on a little bit from what Tim was talking about. And a lot of this is, you know, old stuff that's been repeated over quite a few funding programs, I guess. Framework 5, Framework 6, Framework 7. It's still true, and people still make the same mistakes. Evaluators aren't always native English speakers, and you know, we still see proposals with some very flowery English, to say the least, that you know, even I have to sort of read 2 or 3 times before I understand, you know, what the proposers are trying to say. So not entirely useful. The evaluators don't have a great deal of time to read proposals, so if there's something they don't understand, they've got to read it 2 or 3 times. That's very, very bad news. You're wasting the time and you're not getting your point across. So make it very, very easy. Content is key, you know, it's really, really important, but don't ignore the form of the proposal as well. And again, I might argue that this is very pertinent to when we're talking about SSH today. You know, the structure, the quality of the text, the use of graphics, the way you sort of literally present your argument and make it attractive in the proposal is very important. Readability, certainly personally, I believe, is very important. The summary is something that people don't necessarily spend enough time on. I guess when I left sort of university, my father, who was a production director and been involved in big business, he said, when you start working out there and doing whatever you're doing, if you write reports, do anything like that, summary is the most important thing to write, because it's the only thing that your manager is likely to read. And over the years, you know, I've realized how true that is. If you have a poor summary that doesn't engage the evaluator, it puts them off from the very, very start. If you've got a good, interesting summary that cuts to the chase, says something exciting, something that interesting the evaluator wants to read more about, that's a great help. One of my pet hates is unsubstantiated claims in projects or in proposals. And you see it all the time. You know, we have this amazing product. We think we can hit the market within 3 years, and we believe we can take 15% of a 5 billion global market. And the proposals have been written by sort of you know, a startup company with 3 people in it. And I was like, oh, no, I don't believe it. I simply don't believe it. So you get all sorts of technical claims, market claims, route to market claims, with no backing, no data to suggest that you know, there's any truth in it, and that's very annoying. Recognizing competitors, competing products and services. A lot of the stuff you're proposing is going to be bleeding edge, state of the art. So you've got to understand what's out there and why your organization and why your idea is better than anything else. You've got to sell that. Show understanding of the risks in the project. And in Horizon 2020, we've very much moved, the game has moved on very much from lots of pure research stuff. It's much, much closer to market, looking at lots of projects that involve piloting, demonstration, okay? Lots of activities like that. So you've got to have end user input. You know, it's got to be industry where appropriate, the right partners, advisory panels to advise and deliver the sort of demonstration pilots in real world sort of environments that the Commission are looking for. So I guess overall, show who the users are, show what the need out there is, show that there's a workable potential solution, show why it's important to the EU and across Europe, and show your ability to deliver. Sell the consortium, sell your ability, and give, you know, evaluators some confidence that not only is it just a clever idea, that you can actually make it happen. That's obviously important. And lastly, understand and stick to the rules. As I said, right at the start, right up front, important to get it right. And I think increasingly this is more Dragon's Den than anything else, especially with the closer to market activities. Grant preparation. Well, it suggested earlier that in Framework 7 this was called negotiation. In Framework 7 it was a terrible misuse of the word, since it was never any negotiation. You basically did what you were told by the Commission, by and large. So grant preparation stage, you go through validation of the organisation, if that hasn't already been done, and there'll be a financial viability check for organisations if they're coordinators generally. The important thing about the grant preparation stage now is that because there's no negotiation, everything is much, much shorter. So instead of the sort of 12, 18 months time to grant that we had in Framework 6 and Framework 7, the Commission have an undertaking to get the grant signed up and hopefully projects started within 8 months of the end of the call. So that's a huge improvement in what they did before. And in overall terms, I would say not too bad at all. The problem is, to achieve this, something's got to give. And what has gone is this idea of negotiation. So if we go back to Framework 7, when the evaluators looked at your great proposal, they'd maybe see a good idea. They liked what they saw. It was maybe a little bit rough around the edges, though. And they might suggest, in their evaluation summary report that, Work Package 3 is a little bit overblown. Work Package 7, would actually like a little bit more time in it. Little things like that. So they'd recognise a good project, but they were allowed to write a summary report that said, sort these little bits out round the edges, and it's a runner. They can't do that anymore. If the evaluators identify any shortcomings in the project, it gets marked down. Okay? So you haven't got that sort of breathing space at the so-called negotiation to rewrite the proposal, to rewrite the technical annex and pick up any of these points to sort out the project. So I would suggest that that, in many ways, should change your view or change the way you attack writing proposals. You've got to get it right first time. You don't have a chance to go back and tickle it, or certainly not tickle it very much at a later date. Now, although the Commission are saying no negotiation, what they will do, if within the period of the grant preparation process, if there can be small changes made within that period quickly, then they will allow that. But there won't be any protracted changes to your technical annex. The final easy stage, project delivery. So you'll get pre-financing for the project to start. Very much the same as Framework 7, but the numbers have changed. So typically you're looking at 100% of the average period funding. So for a 3-year project, the reporting periods would usually be 18 months. So you're looking at roundabouts of 50% pre-financing. But remember, the Commission states that this is up to 100% of average period funding. So it could be a little bit less. There's been changes in auditing. In previous programmes, whenever your EU reimbursement reached €375,000, you had to have the project audited. And each time after that, you reached that limit because the sort of clock was reset effectively. That's been changed, and you only require an audit certificate now, or a certificate in the financial statement at the end of the project and as part of the final cost claim, and when the EU reimbursement reaches €325,000. So a little bit more logical to my eyes, and a little bit easier. The important thing to note here is that the 325k doesn't include any lump sums or flat rates. And things like the indirect cost element, the 25% indirect cost for your project is a flat rate. So that isn't included in the 325k. The other important thing is that the cost of the audit certificate is no longer a subcontract. It's just cost of services, so you can claim indirect costs on it. A small victory, but it's something. The other major change that's important for us in the UK is on exchange rates. Again, in previous programmes, what you did was you would accumulate the cost of your project, and at the end of the reporting period, you would convert those to the euro rate on the day after the end of your reporting period. Okay, so the spot rate on that day from the European Central Bank website. That obviously left you a little bit exposed to exchange rates, good or bad. and really there's nothing you could do about that. Now what you do within Horizon 2020 is you use an average rate, so you average the spot rates across the daily rates across the period of the report. So hopefully that should be a little bit better and leave organisations a little bit less exposed to fluctuations. So in terms of project delivery, the sort of issues we sort of repeatedly see with participants is poor record keeping generally, things like timesheets, making assumptions and cost, eligible costs within the project and getting caught out. The overall grant management system is a little bit more streamlined. Everything is done electronically now through the portal, so all the cost claims, all the reporting, and again, it's fairly logical. It's, I would say, still imperfect, but it's a much better system than we had before and much easier to use. So all the communications, everything you do within your project is via the portal. So you've got to get used to the form and format of it. Very, very briefly, I'll mention sort of IPR in Horizon 2020. I don't get many questions about IPR. By and large, I leave that to organisations themselves and their lawyers to sort out. Really just wanted to point out here, sort of at the bottom of the screen, some links here to information in the Annotated Model Grant Agreement that are relevant, and also the IPR Help Desk. So there's a Commission project that's been around for a few years, and they provide a helpline, a website with lots of really, really good information, lots of guidance material and data sheets, and things like non-disclosure agreements as models and model consortium agreements. They've got a helpline and FAQs, so lots of good information in there. Ethics, again, mentioned fairly briefly. Ethics is something that the Commission have become rather hotter on throughout Framework 7 and certainly going into Horizon 2020. They're pretty sensitive to the whole thing, to be honest. So as part of your proposal, you're going to have to address things where relevant, things like sort of human protection, animals, data protection, dual-use technologies and things like that. I've had at least a couple of inquiries in the last week about ethics, people saying, well, this is my project, this is what my project is doing, I don't think there are any ethical issues there. And despite the fact that it's not actually an area I know a great deal about, you sort of go, you're going to be interviewing people, you're going to be collecting data from people, going to be some data management issues in there, surely. So don't dodge it, consider it quite seriously. So as an applicant, each individual applicant, is responsible for the ethical issues in the part of the project they're involved in their particular work packages, and got to identify them and work out how you're going to handle them to the satisfaction of the Commission. So some good information in there. There's a guide on how to complete your ethics self-assessment. You can get in the reference documents page of the portal, and the sort of links there at the bottom of the page. So I guess overall, lastly, I think it was suggested earlier, do your homework. As people have said in the past, the sort of harder you work, the luckier you get. And I think that's pretty true of Horizon 2020. Get to know where to find information. There is a lot of stuff in there, and it is quite useful. Understand, why you're getting involved, what your role is, and what value, you add to the projects. Understand all the rules, and ensure that the consortium agreement works for you. It's fairly standard that every few weeks I get a phone call from somebody who says, oh, terrible problems in the consortium, this organisation won't do this, or they're all ganging up on me, or something of that ilk, and ask me, what should I do? Well, the answer is, well, what does your consortium agreement say you should do? And sadly, some people end up saying, well, it's only 2 pages. Well, what would you like me to do about it? It's your project. You've got to look at these things and understand how the project is going to work. So I guess lastly, use the National Contact Point Network. We're free, we're around to provide help and advice and really any matters within the programme. And in my case, I'm still heavily involved in Framework 7 projects, as clearly a lot of those are still going and will be going on for some years and throwing up a few issues for me to deal with, no doubt. Thanks very much.